Okay, we're ready to go. Were there technical difficulties or just like getting started here? Well, whatever. Okay, I'm calling the meeting of the Shutesbury Selectboard to order. Today is Tuesday, February 27th, and we are meeting, it's the 27th, right?
It's the 28th, I think.
It's the 28th. Why did I have 20? That's right. Okay, I stand corrected. I thought it was the 28th. We are conducting this meeting remotely through Zoom. And the first item on the agenda is for me to review the agenda, and we'll go on from there. So as always, the first item is public comment, and I ask that people keep their comments to no more than 2 minutes. After public comment, we have one set of minutes to review from January 31st. The appointment of a firefighter is next. At 5:50, we will review and we'll have a vote on the public involvement plan, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. Then at 6 o'clock, we have Fuss and O'Neill, our licensed site professionals who are dealing with Lat 032, who are going to be doing a presentation this evening. After that, discussing annual town meeting and possibly changing the date. Then a discussion about possibility of some funding for the PFAS mitigation through the Clean Water Trust. Then after that, talking about Lake Wyola drawdown, an update on PFAS, and then town administrator updates. So as you can see, we have a full agenda this evening, and why don't we just go ahead. So I ask that if you have a public comment to please use the raised hand feature. The other thing, Melissa, I'm just going to ask if you'd be willing to just keep track of time tonight, since we do have a really full agenda, and I want to make sure we get everything in a timely manner.
Rita, if I could ask Becky to make me co-host in case her signal
I will do
drops,
that.
we won't drop the meeting.
Great idea. We've lost Becky a couple of times recently. So, and Becky, you have all of the material at hand for this evening, the presentation, everything.
I
else?
do. I'm going to make Matt Cassane a co-host now too.
Okay,
I know, I think he wanted to be in charge of moving his PowerPoint ahead. So
okay, all right.
He has access.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so we'll go ahead and if anybody has a public comment, again, I ask that you use the raised hand feature and just identify yourself. Are there no public comments? Okay, going once, twice. All right, we will move ahead with the agenda then. So we have minutes from January 31st for review. I was not at that meeting, so I won't, I will pass on voting on those minutes.
I will make a motion that we approve the minutes from January 31st, 2023.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion, any edits, additions, deletions to the minutes?
I don't think so. I don't have
I
any.
didn't have any. Oh.
Okay, all right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Make peace, O'Neill, aye.
Stalker eye.
Farrell abstains. Okay. Becky, we have a firefighter appointment this evening. So is somebody from the fire
I
department?
just checked in with, I believe Andy is here.
Okay,
Andy Regan. But we're waiting, I was just waiting on Lenny. He had planned to be here. We are a few minutes ahead, maybe give him 2 more minutes.
okay. Is there something else that you want to move up? Are there any updates that you could do now as opposed to at the end of the meeting?
Um,
We have, what time is it? 5:36, so we have about 9 minutes.
9 minutes, okay. How about could we talk about the annual town meeting date change?
Yeah, that would actually be great.
Okay, so I put this request forward to the select board for 2 reasons. There is it helps ensure that the engineers have plenty of time in case there is any delay in getting the bids out or getting the bids back.
The bids for,
The school roof
Okay.
at the elementary school, as well as we have there could be some more work to do with PFAS that we might want to take to annual town meeting, where I'm not certain on that, but having the extra couple of weeks will help ensure that those questions can get on the warrant, as well as there are at least 3 there are 2 department heads that will not be in town for the meeting, and they can also make this later date.
so we were originally scheduled for June 20th, correct?
For May 20th.
May 20th, I mean.
We're
May 20th.
asking for June 3rd.
And how does that affect the election cycle and kind of all those other things that, so the whole calendar changes then
The
for,
calendar, what is mostly impacted by the calendar change is appointments for those who had taken out papers. But at the time we did, over this weekend that we've been discussing this, only 1 person has taken out papers. And I believe he kindly said he would, if the date changes, he will resubmit his papers, which is the most secure way to do it. You can change the date per Donna McNichol, but if the person is willing, it's just cleaner to have him redo the papers.
and what's the plan for, or should we be discussing the plan? We're doing the town meeting as we've done the last 2 years, 3 years?
3 years.
Outside 3 years? Behind the town hall with the tent?
Yes, that's our plan again for this year.
So what do you need from the select board? Do we need a vote?
Yes, we do need a vote on this to change the date again.
I'll make a motion that we change annual town meeting to June 3rd, 2023, Saturday, June 3rd, 2023.
Second,
Is there any further discussion? Has this been, have you checked with the other town boards, Becky? Like the finance, is the finance committee?
Yes, Finance Committee is aware. I mean, I did discuss it with the chair.
All right, a motion's been made and seconded to change annual town meeting to June 3rd rather than May 20th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Carol, aye. 5 more minutes, Becky.
Becky, you might
Yes.
want to reserve a tent now for that date.
There are a lot of graduations then. Yeah.
And weddings.
And reunions at
That's-
campuses.
Yeah.
Speaking of tents, I've been advocating for a while, and I think we should try to do this, everybody in the same tent. Not the way we have been doing it the last few years, just because of the sound issues. That's just my personal feeling, but I don't know if that means we have to get a bigger tent. I don't think it does, but maybe, I don't even know if it's possible, but anyway, I throw it out there.
I think
Yeah.
there's a way we can do that and then supplement with the smaller tents around the larger tent, Eric.
Okay,
I think there is a way.
So I don't see Lenny here yet. anything else, Becky, that,
Um,
oh, there you are. He's here. Okay, maybe we can go ahead if nobody objects. Eric and Melissa, you good with going ahead?
We're 3 minutes
Sure.
ahead. By the way.
Okay. All right, Lenny. So you have a couple of extra minutes if you need them. You're here tonight for the appointment of a new firefighter. And Lenny, maybe you want to introduce Andy, or you want him to introduce himself?
Lenny,
Oops. You're on mute, Lenny. You're not unmuted yet.
it's usually gray at the bottom on the left-hand side. It's a little microphone.
If you hover at the bottom of the screen, if you're on a computer, you'll see it over in the right-hand corner. If you hover your mouse on the bottom,
Right or left?
left, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I mean, ambidextrous, so it's all,
No? Okay, well,
Right,
for
so
those
I'll-
of you who don't know, Lenny Zerwanka is our fire chief and is currently muted. But Lenny, I think with the assistance of I don't know if it was the personnel committee or just a group of town officials, went through an interview process for a new firefighter, and he is here with us tonight. And Andy, if you could introduce yourself and unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about your background and your interest, what made you interested in being a firefighter in Shutesbury? Now I can't hear you either.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can.
Yes, 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 yes.
That's good.
Welcome, Andy.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Andy Reagan. I've been in Shutesbury for almost 6 years now. And we have 3 kids, where 2 of them are now in SES and a third will be soon. Yeah, I'm interested in joining the fire department to just help out more around town and get more involved in the community. Yeah, that's me. I work full-time at Mass Mutual, mostly remote now, which is good because more people in town during the day means more people who can respond to calls. I think there's only a couple of or 3 on the fire department who are in town during the day now, so that's helpful. And yeah, I'm excited to help out where I can. Yeah.
And do you have any background in firefighting, or you'll be trained?
Yeah, so I've been going through training with a couple other folks who are in the process of joining over the past 3 months now. Yeah, been learning a lot, and yeah, excited to continue to learn more. At some point, I'll get trained to be a first responder. So the fire department here is certified to respond at a first responder level, and you know, being out Shutesbury are often the first people to get to an emergency scene. So yeah, I'll be doing that training at some point as well. And yeah, learning the basics now. So yeah, but I don't have any relevant background really.
But just enthusiasm. That's good. That counts for a lot.
Well, yeah, I'm
Lenny, I see that you're unmuted. Is there anything you'd like to add, or? Oh boy, it looks like you're unmuted, but we can't hear you. Eric, were you part of the interview process?
I was, Andy was fine. I would endorse him completely.
Okay. Melissa, do you have any questions?
no, I'm good.
Okay, so the process is that the select board votes, and then is it immediately, Andy's immediately a firefighter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. All right, so do I hear a motion to appoint Andy Regan as a Shutesbury firefighter?
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Farrell, aye. All right, I don't want to, I really would rather not start the description until as many people as, we had it on the agenda for 5:50. So I'd rather just start it then, since it's important. And so Becky, I'm going to go back to you. Is there anything else just in terms of updates that you want to give us now?
I can just go to some of my updates.
Okay.
So we had a surprising end to last week. One of our department heads was in early to shovel and use a snow blower. And when she opened the back door, it fell off its hinges. So this is a request for anyone coming to town hall for this short while to please use the front door. The back door is locked. I wanted to thank David and Susie Mosier for getting the door back in such a state that we could close it that night, which I went by 4 o'clock. I was in quite a panic because I couldn't get it shut. So I'm very grateful to the assistance from them. As you have noted, we've had some firefighter interviews this past week, as well as a couple of police interviews. So the appointment schedule on the agenda might stay busy for the next couple of meetings as these wonderful candidates come and join our departments. We also had a snow day, as everybody is pretty well aware, but it's been, oh, bye, Andy. Thank you for coming.
Oh, bye, Andy.
Thanks all. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we've, the snow day has been relatively quiet, an incredibly long day for our highway department. But things seem to be winding down with things in good order. I haven't heard of any more mechanical issues with the highway department, which is a good thing because they've had quite a few this year. And the town hall has been blessed with a snow blower, which we are learning to use. It came through a path of where we did not have to pay for it. It was indirect donation from the police department. And we are making good use of that. It's the first time we've had anything but shovels to work with. So we're greatly appreciative of that at Town Hall. How many more minutes, Rita? 9 more minutes?
No, you have
Nope.
you have 1 minute.
Sorry.
Oh, just 1 minute. Okay. We've also just had, well, this one might take a while.
Well, why don't we wrap it up then, because
Okay.
you can I can just start the introduction to the public
Sounds
improvement plan, and if you want to put up on the screen, I just did a kind of overview for everybody. So what we're talking about next is the public involvement plan. And what the public involvement plan is, they are regulations promulgated by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. And actually, I'm talking about the Massachusetts Contingency Plan has regulations promulgated by the Department of Environmental Protection, and it lays out rules for conducting the investigation and cleanup of contaminated sites regulated under the MCP. And the MCP encourages citizens to participate in the process of investigating and cleaning up sites. And tonight we are going to be talking about the investigation and cleanup of a hazardous waste site on lot 032. The first step in the public involvement plan is that interested citizens submit a petition, and the town has received a petition. It was received on February 13th of this year regarding lot 032 and the hazardous waste site at the location of the former Air Force Tower. And we're not going to go into a lot of details about that because the next presentation is going to be talking specifically about that site. But what the select board is responsible for doing is once it receives this petition, the town must respond in writing within 20 days of receipt of the petition. We are still within the 20-day period. And we would then go, and if the select board chooses, we would designate this site, this particular site, again, that we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, as a PIP site. And what that means is that within then 60 days of the receipt of the petition, that the town has to prepare a plan. And what that plan talks about and what's laid out in that plan is how the town is going to engage with people who are interested, including people who are, who signed the petition, and to, have a formal agreement with those petitioners about how the town's going to share information and how the public will be able to comment on the town's plans for assessment and cleanup of the site. So the first step in this process is we as a select board will vote tonight as to whether or not we will designate lot 032 as a PIP site. And then the town has to prepare, draft a plan. As noted in one of the bullets there, while we are developing the draft, we will be in touch with the petitioners and appropriate local officials to identify community concerns. And what I'm laying out here is is basically a summary of what the Massachusetts contingency plan requires when a PIP is happening. There will be a public meeting to present the draft PIP and to provide an update on site conditions and plans. Then there's a comment period of at least 20 days for the public to review and suggest changes to the PIP. And then a final plan must be completed and made available to the public within 30 days of the close of the comment period. So what we can do is attach dates to all of this once we come to agreement. I did put one date in there about within the 60-day period so that people understood the deadline for getting the PIP prepared. Then the plan is implemented throughout the cleanup process. So that's an overview of the PIP. As I said, it is there are guidelines set forth by the MCP, and this is a distillation of those guidelines. What we can do is put this up on the town website, Becky, after we have a vote this evening. So I'd like to take questions from Eric and Melissa.
I have a question, I mean, we're obligated to do this. I mean, now, as I understand it, the vote is almost ceremonial, if you will. Aren't we obligated to have this happen, make this happen?
I don't know an absolute answer to that question because I've never been told we have to do it. I think it makes sense for us to do it. And, you know, to be honest, we have been really, you know, sharing all the information, all the reports. You know, there's been nothing kind of held back from the public. This kind of formalizes what I think we're already doing. You know, we've been taking comments, but this sets up a more formal process for doing that. And you know, again, is sanctioned by the, you know, by the DEP. So I don't see why we wouldn't do it.
Well, my only fear is that so I'm certainly, I think, and totally in favor of the general gist of it, why it happens and so forth. But I can't believe it's not going to cost us a lot of money. Am I wrong about that? I mean, my sense is, from what I've read about it, is that there's a lot of duplication of reports, and you're talking about setting up this plan and additional meetings. And I mean, it's, you know, all I'm trying to say is that it's a lot. It's a lot, that's all. And I think that my guess is that by the time we're done with it, we'll probably have to have our licensed site professionals involved in this, and that's going to not be free. That's all. My objection is it's just if we're trying to save money as a town, which I think we are, at least I am. That's all. I just think I think it's going to be costly. Does anyone have an idea what this is going to cost?
No, although were we to, if we were to engage an outside, say an engineering firm or licensed site professional to oversee this, it would be very costly. There are definitely costs associated with it. I think the burden is going, I think because we don't want to spend tens of thousands of dollars paying for, you know, paying for an LSP, a licensed site professional, to oversee this. I think it's going to, it's places an additional burden on town staff and probably on the select board too, in doing this. And so that's part of the deal.
Yeah.
We don't, you know, we can't pay $30,000 or $40,000 to have an LSP. It does not mean that we're not going to need an LSP at times. So, Melissa, do you have any questions?
No, and the cost was something that I was thinking of, but if we can do some of it ourselves with those resources here until we need someone that's licensed, seems a more budget friendly way to do it. But I agree, we're headed down doing something. So this is just codifying what we're already starting to put together.
What we have been doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Amanda, I see
Right.
your hand. I'll take one question. Amanda Alex was the lead petitioner. So, and we're right up against our 6 o'clock, our next agenda item. So Amanda, if you could make it brief.
Sure. Hi. I just wanted to actually clarify that when the site is tier classified by the LSP and it's sent into DEP and you receive the petition, it's automatically a public involvement plan site. I think that was a question you guys were asking about. We can check with your people about it.
Yeah, we have to vote to accept the petition. So, okay. So do I hear a motion to accept the petition to designate the site at Lot 032 as a, for a public involvement plan, sorry. There's going to be improvement there too. There's going to be involvement and improvement.
Improvement.
So,
So moved.
is there a
Second,
second?
second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion?
No, I think, nope.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Make peace, O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Farrell, aye. And I will try to get dates attached to these kind of key benchmarks within the schedule, sort of the outer dates. And we'll get that posted on the town website so that if anybody has questions about the PIP, we'll just call it the PIP, then they can find the answers there. Okay. Thanks, everybody. So the next item on our agenda is to we're going to have a presentation by Fuss and O'Neill about Lot 032, specifically about the DEP filing for the reportable release of hazardous materials. And if you just bear with me for a minute, I want to do just a brief overview, and then I will introduce our folks from Fuss and O'Neill. So this evening, and I'm going to read, so I do it quickly. This evening, we're only talking about the site of the former Air Force Tower, where there is a reportable release of hazardous materials for which the U.S. Department of Defense is responsible. The town will be pursuing the DoD to make the responsible agency either pay for or clean up this contamination. This release was discovered as a result of the town of Shutesbury's investigations starting back in 2021, when the town undertook voluntary investigations, including soil borings by the former garage and soil borings at the back of Lot 032, which includes the subject of tonight's presentation, Bore 9, what we call the Bore 9 area, the site of the hazardous material release. During that same time period in 2021, the town, following advice from the Department of Environmental Protection, removed debris piles from Lot 032 and did soil borings under those. All of those test results are available on the town and library websites. Other questions about the Lot 032 site, including remaining debris piles adjacent to wetlands, will be addressed in consultation with the Conservation Commission in future meetings. The format for tonight is as follows. Matt Cassane from Fuss and O'Neill will present a PowerPoint presentation with an explanation of the work that has been undertaken to address the release of hazardous materials at Lot 032, also known as a Bore 9 site. The Select Board will then have an opportunity to ask questions. Then Matt Cassane and Tim Clinton, Fuss and O'Neill's licensed, Tim is the Fuss and O'Neill's licensed site professional, will answer questions that were submitted in writing prior to the Monday midday deadline. We will not be taking questions from the floor this evening. There'll be ample opportunity to ask questions if you have questions about tonight's presentation beyond what was submitted in advance of the meeting. Residents can forward questions to the Select Board after this meeting, and we will do our best to answer them in a timely manner, either in writing or at a future meeting. In addition, the public involvement plan that we just spoke about will provide an opportunity for townspeople to get involved in the planning for the assessment and cleanup of this hazardous materials site. So with that, I'm going to introduce Matt Cassane from Fuss and O'Neill. And Matt has a PowerPoint presentation that he is going to give us. So Matt, I hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Rita. Also, thank you to the select board for having us come here tonight to give this presentation. We appreciate the opportunity. Just bear with me for a second here while I get my screen share up. And if you can just let me know, Rita, when you see PowerPoint presentation.
It's up, Matt.
Okay, perfect. All right, so as Rita said, my name is Matt Cassane. I'm a senior geologist at Fuss & O'Neill. We are located in downtown Springfield. Also with me tonight is the LSP of record, or the licensed professional record for this site.
Matt, can I just interrupt you for a second? I don't know if anybody else is having trouble with the audio, but you seem to be kind of coming in and out a little bit. So I don't know if something can be, your mic can be adjusted.
Let me. So I'm just going to try changing one thing. Is it better if I talk a little bit louder, or are you still having a little difficulty?
It's still a little bit shaky.
Any better now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, just tried changing a setting, so I apologize for that. So as Rita was saying earlier, I'm Matt Cassane. I'm a senior geologist with Fuss & O'Neill and the project manager on this project. Fuss & O'Neill is a multidisciplinary engineering environmental consulting firm. We're located in Springfield, but we have offices throughout New England. Also on the call, just kind of in an advisory capacity, is Tim Clinton. He is a certified professional geologist and a licensed site professional in the state of Massachusetts. And he is the LSP of record now for this release site. So, what we'll be discussing tonight is, really related to the release tracking number that relates to the, release of hazardous materials back in the old, very high frequency radar array area of the site that was operated historically by the DoD. So you can see here, I'll refer to things sometimes throughout the presentation as an RTN. That is what a release, or is an acronym for release tracking number. And that's how the state, or the Mass DEP, tracks hazardous waste sites across the Commonwealth. All right, so you can see an agenda here of what we're going to go over tonight. We've been asked to provide just a quick overview of what the MCP is. We're going to go through just a little bit of background on the site for those folks that aren't familiar with the site itself. We'll talk about the release itself, how it occurred, how it was assessed, and our current understanding. We'll talk a little bit about the, go into a little bit greater depth about the assessment that we've completed to date, and then a little bit about what the town's planned next steps are for the site. So the Massachusetts Contingency Plan, which is commonly referred to as the MCP, is a body of regulations that were promulgated by the Mass DEP in 1983. These regulations were promulgated in response to Mass General Law, Chapter 21E. And that was created in 1983 and was a way in which, sorry, one second here. It's the Massachusetts Oil and Hazardous Material Release, Prevention, and Response Act. So that was passed in 1983, and then the Mass DEP promulgated the MCP as a vehicle in which to carry out 21E, or Mass General Law 21E. The revised MCP, or the first large revision of the MCP, was in 1993, and what that did was privatize the cleanup of sites. So previous to 1993, the cleanup was overseen by the DEP itself, but due to limits in staffing and ability, there was a big kind of logjam of sites that weren't able to move through the system. So in response to that, in 1993, they revised the MCP to privatize the system through what is known as the Licensed Site Professional Program, or the LSP program. An LSP is an environmental scientist or engineer who's experienced in the cleanup of oil and hazardous material contamination. So there's a licensure process in the state of Massachusetts that includes a pretty hefty, application, review of qualifications, and a test, and then you were granted your LSP credential. LSPs are authorized by the state to work on behalf of responsible parties to oversee the assessment and cleanup of sites. So really the LSP drives a site through the program or the MCP to, hopefully closure. And there is the opportunity for DEP oversight. All regulatory reports are submitted to the DEP. The DEP has the ability to audit sites and to confirm that the LSP is, or the responsible party are conducting response actions in the correct way. But when it comes down to it, really the LSP on behalf of the PRP drives the site through the process and the requirements. Again, so the LSP record for this site is Tim, who's on with us tonight. The most recent update to the MCP, there's updates that get promulgated through kind of periodically to respond to changes and things that are going on, emerging contaminants, things like that. I know, something that probably a lot of people have heard of recently is PFAS. In 2019, there were new updates to the MCP that were promulgated to reflect, new standards regarding PFAS, in addition to some other changes that, were related. Actually, there's a few that were related to climate change type issues and working that into site assessment. Just to give you a little bit of more background here, and I know sometimes a hazardous waste site, release site can kind of be a scary thing to hear, but there's over 44,000 confirmed and suspected hazardous waste sites in the Commonwealth at different parts of the spectrum, closed sites, open sites, sites that are closed with, use limitations. So they're pretty prevalent across the Commonwealth. In Shutesbury, you have 13 that are listed on the EEA data viewer. Just to give you some other local reference points, there's 179 of these sites in Amherst, there's 82 in Belchertown, and there's 1,274 in Springfield. So you can see, obviously, you would expect to see more of these in urbanized centers, areas where there's industry, things like that. But, the release criteria, really kind of drives, there is a very kind of low bar of what should be reported or to the Mass DEP. Whereas if you spill 10 gallons, a 10-gallon container of gasoline in your backyard, technically that would constitute a reportable release to the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. So just to put things into perspective a little bit. So here is just a brief streamlined chart showing what the process is from reporting to closure. You can see here on the front end, you have a notification. Depending on the severity of what has occurred or is occurring, you either have a 2-hour, 72-hour, or 120-day notification condition. Obviously, 2-hour being the kind of reserved for the worst cases, 120-day for something that's has more time to be kind of addressed. In this case, the release that initially tripped this reportable condition was 120-day reportable release. Now, once you've done a notification, there is an opportunity to do a limited response action and not even enter the site into the next phases of the process. That sometimes if there's a small release, like I said, 10 gallons of gasoline, if you're able to get out there right away, remove what was spilled, confirm that it's gone, you can kind of just end it at that point. Obviously, you would document that, but you wouldn't have to carry the site through the remainder of the process. But most sites do have to enter into the next steps. So for this site, we entered into the phase 1 activity, which included a phase 1 initial site investigation report and some additional phase 2 sampling. So we went out, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, and did some additional investigation following the reporting of the release, and then compiled a phase 1 report. You can see here kind of what the next steps would be or can be. There are some options for how to kind of, work your way through the system and hopefully reach a permanent solution. There's also opportunities to reach what is called a temporary solution, where you kind of clean up a site to what is feasible, but say that you've, eliminated the, no significant risk to the site. So, you can kind of see this here. There's other charts available online through the Mass DEP's website that also lay out, what the MCP program is and how to go about it. All right, so a little bit of background on the site. For folks that don't know, this parcel, but more specifically kind of the southern end of the parcel, was historically used by the US Air Force for a terminal, very high frequency omni-range radar array. I'm not very well versed on exactly what that does or did. There's probably some folks on this call who know a little bit better, but it was, a military installment that was used for surveillance related to, Westover Air Force Base for tracking of aircraft, et cetera. So that was operated for 10 years between 1957 and 1967 through a land lease. By 1972, that facility had been deconstructed or largely deconstructed. In 1992, the Department of Defense Installation Restoration Program, which is kind of their internal department that looks at sites that may need to be cleaned up by the Department of Defense, recommended that someone go out and remove a 275-gallon gasoline UST, or underground storage tank. This UST was used as a power source for a backup generator that was used for the TVOR facility, from what we can tell from records. So just to give you a little bit of a reference point, a 275-gallon tank, if you heat your home with fuel oil, it's about the size of the AST you would have in your basement or a UST you would have outside. So it's not something the size of, let's say, a gasoline holding tank at a refueling station. These are, we'll see some pictures on the next slide, but it's kind of a rather small, just backup generator supply tank. In 1994, the Army Corps of Engineers did go out to the site. They removed the UST, and then they excavated an additional 100 tons of petroleum impacted soils from around vicinity of where the UST was located. So that UST was shipped off site to a disposal facility, and then the 100 tons of petroleum impacted soils were removed from the site as well. We don't know where the Army Corps took them. That's not in the records, but safe to assume that it went to a disposal facility of some sort.
Matt, can I ask you, can you use your cursor to show us sort of approximately where on the site? Is it right there? Okay.
Yeah, so this is the TVOR facility. You can see that there was an access road that came off of Pelham Hill Road.
Pelham Hill.
Yep, Pelham Hill Road here to the west and entered in. And you can see they're actually around the TVOR facility. I did a little research on these facilities. They used, I believe for siting purposes, an array of wooden posts. And you can kind of see that in this larger circle. And we've actually found kind of remnants of a couple of those while we've been out there. So this is the front of the parcel up here. You can see that the 3-bay, actually, I don't know if you can even see the 3-bay garage here, but the residence that was once located here. And our location, which, we'll take a look at in a second, is right in the vicinity of where the TVOR was once located.
Yep.
So here are some pictures that were provided by the Army Corps of Engineers showing the removal of the tank and subsequent excavation of the soils. You can see that the personal protective equipment that was worn back in 1993 with the jean shorts, it's not as stringent as what we would wear going into the field today. But you can see that they're removing the tank from the subsurface, and it gives you a little idea of the size of the tank. So like I said, it's similar in size to a fuel oil AST that one might have in their basement. So during removal, they did identify some petroleum impacted soils. Again, they excavated, we have seen record of some limited sampling that they did. The analytical methods back in the early to mid 90s were not as robust as they are today. There weren't a lot of options of what you could run, and the detection limits weren't what we have today. So, from what we can tell, they thought that they cleaned up to the extent that, impacts existed. Obviously, through our further investigation, OTO's further investigation in 2021, we found that there's some remnants that were left. So going back again and talking about, what investigations have been done to date, or what, got us to where we are. I think Rita kind of briefly mentioned that there was an investigation done back in 2021 by OTO, who's also out of Springfield, on behalf of the town. They did kind of a parcel-wide, limited phase 2 subsurface investigation looking at groundwater and soil quality. They put borings kind of across the site, and one of them was in the vicinity of that old TVOR facility, kind of adjacent to a concrete pad that most likely either once housed the generator itself or potentially, some other component of it. That soil boring, which they denoted as B9, was the only boring that came back with a condition or result that exceeded one or more of the reportable criteria in the state of Massachusetts. So under the MCP, they have a list of reportable criteria, or levels at which, if your result meets or exceeds, you need to report that to the DEP. There are 2 for soil. There's the RCS 1, which is a reportable criteria for soil 1, or there is the RCS 2. The RCS 1 being the most stringent of both. So for this site, we compare against the RCS 1, and they had one result of what's called a volatile petroleum hydrocarbon range, so a petroleum type of compound. They had one result that met the RCS1, so it equaled it exactly. The RCS1 was 100 milligrams per kilogram. The result was 100 milligrams per kilogram. So, if you meet or exceed, it is a reportable condition. So the town reported the condition to the Mass DEP. In response, the Mass DEP issued a notice of responsibility and then assigned the site an RTM. So that's just kind of the normal process of how it happens. So the RTM they assign to the site, which tracks it through the whole program, is 12-21489. 1 denotes the region, 1 is Western Mass, and then the site number is 21489. The town asked us in 2022 to go back out and take a look at this condition. There had been some initial discussion with the DoD about this condition. And the town wanted to get a better idea of the nature and extent of what was going on, and to continue carrying this site through the MCP process. So we went out in November and December of 2022. We installed an additional 8 what are called soil borings in the vicinity of that initial B9 boring. Just a quick kind of rundown of soil boring: that you bring out a drill rig, similar to how you would drill, a well, and that, probes down into the ground. It returns soil up to the surface. We're able to observe the soil, collect it in jars, send it off to lab for analysis, and take a look at the results. So we did 8 soil borings, and we installed, over the course of November and December, a total of 5 groundwater monitoring wells in the area to assess groundwater conditions in addition to the soil conditions. As a result of that initial, or our November, December 2022 soil sampling, we weren't able to replicate any of the exceedances or any exceedance in the soil conditions, but we did see exceedances of applicable criteria or method 1 cleanup criteria for groundwater conditions. So we did get some groundwater results back that exceeded their applicable criteria under the MCP. But again, the soil conditions, we still weren't able to find any soil in the vicinity that exceeded either the reportable criteria or what's called the method 1 cleanup criteria. I guess just stepping back on that quick, the method 1 cleanup criteria is once you enter into the program, what you compare your values against. Once you've been reported, then you use the method 1 cleanup criteria. In January of 2023, we assisted the town with the submittal of a phase 1 initial site investigation, which is a fairly comprehensive report detailing kind of everything we know to date and our initial assessment of the nature and extent of the release condition, and also discussion about sensitive receptors, the groundwater conditions and how we think things are behaving and how they're bounded. We also, in conjunction with that, submitted a tier classification, or you're required to submit a tier classification. There's 2 tiers that you can classify a site as, tier 1 or tier 2. It's based off of its location within resource areas. In this case, because there's potential drinking water sources within 500 feet, we classified this site as a tier 1 site. So just going back to our investigation, this was our figure that we included with our phase 1 initial site investigation. You can see zoomed out, the whole parcel here. Obviously, it's a very elongated parcel north to south. You have kind of the cleared area up here, and about 1,000 feet or more back from the tree line here is this inset part to the figure. And then if you look over to the side here on the inset, you'll see our soil boring locations. So we put in 8 soil borings. One was to try to replicate the initial condition seen at B9. So we put that in immediately adjacent to the original OTO B9 sample. And then we did kind of concentric rings out from that point in order to see how soil conditions changed as we stepped out from what we believe to be the source area. During our soil boring investigation and looking at our results, we actually determined that kind of the worst area seemed to be a little bit further toward this MW09 well right here and next to soil boring B14. So we went back out after looking, we initially set a well at MW09, got results for MW09, had exceedances of applicable method 1 criteria, and the town decided to install additional wells to try to capture kind of the extent of the groundwater condition and understand better, groundwater flow direction and what might be going on in the kind of the larger vicinity. So again, we installed an additional 4 monitoring wells in a ring around the original MW09. And you can see here at the time of the phase 1 ISI submittal, you're supposed to come up with what you are thinking is the preliminary disposal site boundary, or where you think the bounds of the impacts are kind of exist based off of the data set that you currently have. So you can see that denoted in this blue hatched line kind of surrounding the 5 monitoring wells. Now that is also, kind of subject to change as you take additional data and move through the process. You're going to tighten that up in certain areas and probably draw it out in others. But during the phase 1 ISI, you use the data that you have in hand to make your best assessment at that time. So as we take more groundwater samples and potentially someday install more wells, we'll probably end up changing that disposal site boundary slightly. But I think what's important to note here is that based off of the conditions, groundwater flow conditions, the concentrations we're seeing in soil and groundwater, this appears to be a very localized condition. So what likely happened, right, is you had the UST that the DoD was utilizing, either it leaked during removal or probably, had a slow leak for years during use. And when they removed the tank, they knew that there was impacts to the surrounding soil, excavated, but obviously didn't get to what we would call a clean margin, or they weren't able to truly define what was the the limits of those impacts. So there was some sort of amount of petroleum impacted soils or groundwater left in place that we're still seeing today. So what are our next steps out here? In our phase 1 ISI, we outlined briefly kind of what our scope is moving forward. And right now that looks like for the near term, a continued seasonal sampling of our monitoring well network. It's important with groundwater conditions to get an idea of how groundwater conditions are behaving with seasonal variation. I mean, obviously, our groundwater wells are about 18 feet deep, and they're capturing water quality from a depth of about 8 feet to 18 feet deep, and what's called the screened interval. But as you know, if we have a drought period like we did, or summer of last year, groundwater is going to draw down very low. And if we have very wet conditions, groundwater is going to come up. Petroleum levels in groundwater can change because of that change in water level. Obviously, petroleum, or at least gasoline petroleums will sit on top of water. So as you have water rise up or down, that kind of brings it up and down the soil column in what's called a smear zone. So you, depending on groundwater conditions, may get different results. So we like to see things over the course of a few seasons or quarters and kind of look at long-term trends in the conditions themselves, groundwater flow, groundwater levels, and get a better idea of how these things are kind of working in a spatial sense. We're going to review any kind of subsequent data that we get and see if there is a need to put in additional groundwater monitoring wells, potentially in stepped out locations from wells that are still showing either elevated levels of petroleum related compounds or exceedances of the method 1 criteria. That will probably happen after we've had a chance to review some subsequent rounds of data. Just for everyone to know, I know that Rita was talking about the PIP process before. Even if you're not involved in the PIP process, every regulatory submittal, I know the town has been putting them up on their website, but they're also automatically populated into the EEA's database, which is the Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs under the, it's a state program, but they post them at this website right here. You can generally find it too, just kind of a Google search, and you can search by address, RTN, LSP. There's a number of different ways you can search, and you'd be able to see every single regulatory submittal that's come through for a project. So the phase 1 ISI, the release notification form, the notice of responsibility that was issued, any requests for audits, things like that will pop up on that viewer. So if you're, like I said, interested in reading more, again, they've been posted on the town's website, but you can also go there as well. We also intend to assist the town in continuing to pursue the DoD regarding their responsibilities at the site. According to the DoD's own language, you can see here, this is within their own regulatory language. The Department of Defense is responsible for environmental restoration of properties that were formerly owned by, leased to, or otherwise possessed by the United States and under the jurisdiction of the Secretary of Defense prior to October 1986. Such properties are known as formerly used defense sites, or FUDs. The U.S. Army is executive agent of the program, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers manages and directs the program's administration. The DoD outlines itself that they, for these sites or release sites that, were possessed prior to October 1986, they are responsible for the environmental conditions. So, we have indicated in our regulatory submittals that we believe the DoD to be the primary responsible party, but that process is ongoing, or that discussion with them is ongoing. And in the interim, the town has remained committed to continuing assessment of the site and carrying the site, through the requirements of the MCP and in compliance with the MCP. That's just kind of wanted to throw that, language up here. We included it in our phase 1 ISI because I think it's important. And the DEP has also indicated in their notice of responsibility have noted the former use of the site by the DOD.
Thank you, Matt. As I mentioned earlier, what we're going to do now is just take questions from the select board members. And then I know, Matt, we forwarded to you, or Geneva forwarded to you, questions that we received from the public. So you have those. And so I'm gonna just mention a couple of things. This presentation will also be put up on our website for people who weren't able to attend this evening. And we will do the best to get to as many questions as we can. So let's start. Eric or Melissa, do you have any questions for Matt?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask a question. I don't remember if I read this somewhere or, so with the monitoring and such, is this something that will be able to determine a better clean perimeter if digging the soil out is what's needed?
Yeah, so you would have subsequent monitoring to kind of, like I said, further refine that line that you could draw. In an instance like this, where it's a petroleum related impact, the outcome may eventually be kind of a targeted excavation. If you think you can kind of pinpoint a source area, and hopefully that completely alleviates the issue. If it doesn't, if you've removed kind of the source, then groundwater will tend to clean up on its own through what's called monitored natural attenuation. The petroleum breaks down on its own, especially when there's microbes and other kind of oxygen, consuming bacteria. And there's actually ways you can put in additives too to kind of enhance that process. But that's kind of one avenue that you would see, with a petroleum related impact would be, a hotspot excavation potentially, and some continued groundwater monitoring if you saw that conditions were still elevated in the groundwater.
Eric?
So my question would be, as you know, Matt, we're trying to build a library on this site, the town is, and on the larger site. Is anything here that we've talked about tonight? Well, do you see that as affecting that in any way?
No, from what we know so far about this release and what we've seen in groundwater conditions and soil conditions, this appears to be a very kind of localized condition. Like I said, right now, the edge of what we're calling the disposal site boundary, our preliminary disposal site boundary, is about, over 1,000 feet away from the kind of, tree line at the back of the clearing at the front of the parcel. There's been other soil borings that have been conducted up in the front of the site by OTO, additional groundwater sampling, and they didn't find anything at the front of the property that exceeded any of the reportable criteria. Again, we'll continue to assess the groundwater conditions, but at this time, just based off of our monitoring well network, we don't believe that it would have any impact on operations at the front of the property.
So I guess the follow-up question would be, are we the town, are we doing everything we can at this point? We're complying with the law and doing what has to be done to clean the situation up?
Yeah. So the big requirement that the town had to do was to tier classify the site and submit a phase 1 ISI, which it did. After that, there's actually that kind of, I don't want to say buys time, but there is time now for the town to kind of think things through and assess what they would like to do with the site, in conjunction and discussion with their LSP and the DEP. But the town, has asked us to already be kind of proactive, continue to do groundwater monitoring out there, and kind of get more data in the door so we can, better understand what the condition is. So yeah, there's no place, and Tim, you can feel free to interject, where the town is doing everything that they're being required to do. There's been consultation and discussion with the DEP. I think we've everything's kind of been above board in discussion with all the stakeholders to make sure that everyone's on the same page. So in my experience, it's been a very kind of forthcoming and proactive approach to the site.
Yeah, I would like to expand on that. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, it's a little it's a little fuzzy, Tim.
Okay, I'll try and read in a little bit. I do want to expand on that with respect to the tier classification process. There's basically two tiers, and they kind of separate DEP's involvement or level of involvement on these cleanup projects. Tier 1 sort of signals to DEP that this is a site that they should probably be more involved in, and in that case, it was really driven by the proximity to private drinking water wells associated with some of the nearby residences. And we don't know for certain that they are within, that the release.
Tim, you're really getting very unclear. I don't know if you can move the mic
Okay,
closer.
is that any better?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
Okay.
So I was just talking about the tier classification process, and Matt mentioned that the tier 1 classification is really driven by the possibility that the release limits are within.
We're losing you totally.
All right, let me try and call in.
Okay. So while we're waiting on Tim to call in, Matt, I just had a question regarding the relationship with DEP, and I know the MCP really relies upon the licensed site professionals, and you have been doing the required reporting. Is there anything, and the town's continuing, and we have asked you to continue to monitor this site. Is there additional DEP involvement, or do we now, and we're going to pursue the DOD. So we're going to go after the Department of Defense with your assistance to try to get them to either give us money or go ahead and do all the cleanup. Where does DEP kind of come into that mix?
I think that's, a point of ongoing discussion, and something that I think, both the town and us as the LSP of record will be discussing with the DEP to see if, obviously there's avenues that we're gonna, try to go down, from an LSP perspective and a town perspective to pursue, or discuss with the DOD that, their responsibility. But there may be ways in which the DEP can assist with that. There may be other sites across the Commonwealth where there's similar sort of circumstance where there's legacy Department of Defense conditions that, were never fully addressed. And, PRPs or primarily responsible parties have to, kind of try to get them to take care of what should be their issue. So, I think it's worthwhile to continue having that discussion with the DEP and see if there's ways in which they can assist the town in that process. And I also think that, just ongoing discussion with the DEP in general, just to keep them aware of kind of what's going on at the site and just have that discussion with them while we're moving through the process. It can only benefit the town and the site itself. The DEP is generally pretty short-staffed, but they, so far with this project have made themselves available to discuss, some of the questions that we've had. So it's been very helpful, and they've kind of signaled to us that they want to continue kind of, assisting in the way, or at least, giving us input, when necessary, especially when kind of pursuing this DOD issue. So, I think the town right now, like I said, is kind of doing everything that they can to, keep assessing this while also, kind of pursuing who, they believe to be the responsible party, or who we believe to be the responsible party.
Tim, I don't know if you were able to call in. I don't see him. Matt, while we're waiting to see if Tim rejoins us, then I know you had questions forwarded to you from the public, and if you want to go ahead and sort of state what the question is and then the response, that would be great.
Yep. So what I kind of did was go through and there was a lot of questions that kind of touched on similar topics. So I'm going to try to group answers together as best as I can. There were a few questions that referred to, kind of quote unquote landfill conditions at the front of the property. I think Rita, you kind of touched on the fact that, I think there was some discussion of why wasn't this, the debris piles kind of brought into the phase 1 ISI report. The MCP is a release driven program. It is not a parcel driven program. The RTN is for the release condition at the back of the property. Now, in the phase 1 ISI, if you read it, we do talk about parcel-wide site use from a historical perspective. When was the site developed, things like that. But when it comes to actually talking about contaminants of concern, things like that, it's really just related to the petroleum release in B9. Additionally, just to kind of caveat it a little bit, the term landfill has a very prescribed definition under the Mass DEP. A landfill, per the solid waste regs of the state, is a facility or part of a facility that's established in accordance with a valid site assignment for the disposal of solid waste. So I think, what people are kind of referring to at the front of the property would be kind of, debris or debris piles. I think as you noted them to be, Rita. So I just wanted to make sure to kind of caveat that, because there is a whole separate department, the solid waste department within the DEP, that deals with landfills. And this site would not, nothing that has occurred or is occurring, this site would qualify as a landfill.
I see Tim on the phone. I don't know if we want to, Tim, are you there? Maybe not. Okay, keep going, Matt.
Someone did mention or had a question about thallium levels in groundwater. So thallium is a metal. It's one of the metals that, if there's the subset of metals that we run for, that's called the MCP 14, which is the 14 sub metals that the state kind of dictates to sample for. Thallium is one of those metals. On our initial groundwater sample from MW09, we did have a thallium exceedance of the applicable groundwater criteria. During our second round of sampling at all 5 wells, that thallium was non-detect or not detected by the instrument at any level at any of the wells. Thallium is not a contaminant of concern related to a gasoline UST or petroleum UST. We see things like this happen sometimes where you'll get kind of these one-off metals exceedances. It could be due, honestly, to soils or bedrock that have high thallium concentrations naturally. And if you get sediment in the groundwater, the instrument can pick that up. But we will continue to run groundwater samples for the full metals list. So, we'll continue to evaluate whether that's a real concern or just kind of a blip and unrelated to the release. And obviously, if we see that it, comes back on subsequent rounds, then we can assess if there's some other cause of it. But at this time, we don't believe thallium to be a contaminant of concern. Someone asked a question about, in the phase 1 ISI, and I think maybe the EDP form that we put in, why the DoD wasn't kind of formally listed as another PRP. The DEP doesn't really give you the ability to list kind of 2 PRPs, but we did in the phase 1 ISI in a few places note that is our kind of understanding that although the town is carrying out the response actions currently, and is, quote unquote, the PRP or potentially responsible party, we really think that, they're really only doing that because the DoD is not, right? And the DoD should be. But again, the town would prefer for this site not to just kind of sit there unassessed while that communication and discussion is ongoing. Let's see. There's a question kind of piggybacking off of that of whether the US DoD would take place of the town as the PRP and official submittals going forward. That's still something that's kind of in discussion. There's kind of multiple avenues. Rita kind of stated, either the DoD could potentially come in and say, all right, we're going to take over the cleanup and take care of the whole thing, or potentially they'll, try to pay for it, or, so there's many options of how that could go. In the interim, the town will remain the PRP in the system. If the DoD were to kind of accept responsibility for it or take on that title or role, then they would become the PRP under the MCP. Lots of acronyms. Everything's an acronym. Too many acronyms. Let's see. There was a few questions about, and I think, Eric, you already asked a question about kind of conditions at the front of the property. And like I said, it is our current understanding and disposal site assessment that this is not impacting anything toward the front of the property. Like I said, in any kind of normal sized parcel, this back portion of the property would probably be 2 or 3 parcels away from the front of the property. It's just the fact that this is a very long parcel. I think it spans maybe 5 parcels on its western boundary. Obviously it's the same parcel, but like I said, our assessment currently is that the impacts are localized to the 40 feet or so around that MW09 monitoring well. Let's see. Some other questions about other site use at the front of the property and why it wasn't noted in the report again. I kind of hit on that a little bit. It's not in the purview of the phase 1I side to talk about other site use and things that may have happened or could have happened at different parts of the site. This is again related to this specific release. There was a question about the term significant risk or no significant risk. Again, that's just kind of commonplace terminology in the MCP. I know it kind of sounds a little scary to hear the term significant risk, but really what happens is once you get into the MCP system, you're striving to get a condition of no significant risk, which means you've brought all those groundwater, soil levels, maybe air levels down below the cleanup criteria. Then you can, quote unquote, achieve no significant risk and reach permanent closure of the site. So it's really just a way that they kind of denote, what is still in the program versus what's achieved no significant risk and can be closed as an RTN. There was a question about groundwater standards, GW1, GW2, and GW3. So what happens is when you do kind of an initial site assessment, you figure out which groundwater criteria applies to your site or your release. There's 3 criteria in Massachusetts: GW1, GW2, and GW3. GW3 applies to all groundwater across the Commonwealth. GW2 relates to—
He's an engineer.
GW2 relates to depth, the depth of the water and its proximity to a occupied building. So at this site, GW2 does not apply. And GW1 applies to areas that are potential drinking water sources within certain distance from public water supplies, within certain distances from private water supplies. Again, GW1 does apply here. So the most stringent groundwater criteria does apply. So what you need to do is you need to clean up to the standards that apply to your site. So in our case, the GW1 and the GW3. Let's see.
Matt, we have a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
I want to make sure you got the questions answered that needed to be answered.
Yeah, I'm just looking to see if there were any. I think those were kind of the grouped ones. Location was determined based on evaluation. The other one I wanted, it came in later, was a PFAS related question. And I think someone asked why we didn't sample for PFAS back at this well. PFAS is not a contaminative concern related to a petroleum release. I know it is something that is popping up in other places in this town and kind of everywhere across the Commonwealth. But when you sample for a release, you sample for contaminants of concern. PFAS has been sampled at other portions of the property where site use or location dictates. OTO did sample a bedrock well for PFAS back in the 2021 investigation. Didn't find any exceedances of criteria. And the town actually volunteered to sample some soil for PFAS during the underground injection control investigation we did at the front of the site, and everything came back below reportable criteria as well. So I think I hit the broad subjects, but obviously, like you said, Rita, if someone has other questions, they can reach out to you, and you can always follow up with us.
Great. I don't know. Tim, are you there? Is that, no,
I do see the phone.
I see, yeah, I see him there with the phone. I just wanted to give him an opportunity if there was anything else he wanted to add in the
Let me see.
tier 1 or tier 2 classification.
So I think what he was gonna discuss briefly was just that.
Can you hear me
the
okay
tier-
now?
Oh, yeah, we
Yes.
can.
There you are.
Go ahead.
So sorry about the audio difficulties. I appreciate your patience. Yeah, I just wanted to add a point in response to Eric's question earlier about the town's response and, you know, whether or not they were doing things under their obligations under the MCP. And I just wanted to make the point that, you know, we classified the site as a tier 1, working with the town, you know, under the decision that we wanted to err on the side of caution and be conservative. We aren't quite certain that the limits of this release are within 500 feet of private drinking water wells, mainly because we don't know exactly where the wells are on those nearby residential properties. But, you know, given some of that uncertainty and the fact that, you know, we are in a drinking water area and want to make sure that we are, you know, taking all the necessary precautions and executing this work in a conservative manner, we did decide to err on the side of caution and go ahead and classify the site as a tier 1 site. And basically what that does is just signal to the DEP, you know, and that a slightly higher level of involvement is prudent in this case. And so, you know, we have been in regular communication with the DEP and expect that will continue throughout the process. And we felt that was in the best interest, you know, given the public interest in the project, the nearby drinking water wells, of course, and also the proposed use for the, you know, as a public land. So I just wanted to make that point, you know, in response to Eric's question about, you know, how the town is responding.
Great. Thank you, Tim. So Eric and Melissa, I just want to give you, if there's any kind of parting questions, we're kind of a little bit beyond our time limit here, but anything else?
The only question I have is, I think, a yes or no question. Is it safe to assume we can achieve the no significant risk category on this? I mean, somehow we can achieve that. Is that possible? Is that true?
Tim, did you want to answer, or do you want me? Yeah,
I'm certainly I'll take a stab at it, Matt. I'm certainly confident that we can. You know, I think, as Matt had kind of laid out with respect to the assessment, so far it certainly appears that this is a localized release. You know, it's fairly routine to see conditions like this, you know, and typically the appropriate response is to remove the soil that's serving as a source of contamination to the groundwater. And, you know, more times than not, sort of natural processes will kind of clean up the groundwater naturally once that source is removed. So that at this point is our expectation as far as a cleanup strategy and a strategy for getting to that no significant risk level.
Okay, thanks.
Melissa, anything else?
I don't have anything else. No.
Great. Well, I want to thank both Tim Clinton and Matt Cassane for joining us this evening. And as I said at the outset, that if there are follow-up questions, you can submit them. I'm not going to promise everything's going to go back out in writing right away. We are quite busy, but we will do our best to address the questions. And Matt's presentation will be up on the the website. And again, you will have lots of opportunities to participate in discussions through the public involvement process. So again, thank you for everybody showing up this evening, and we're happy to have you stay for the next fascinating parts of our select board meeting. So we'll be hearing from you, Tim and Matt. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so
Thank
the
you.
next, we already discussed the annual town meeting date change. For those of you who weren't here earlier, town meeting will now be, select board voted to have the annual town meeting on June 3rd of this year. So again, we're a little bit behind schedule, but we have some more important things to discuss. And the next item is the Clean Water Trust possible funding for PFAS mitigation. And Becky and I participated in, well, first Eric participated in a meeting last week, and I did, or maybe the week before last.
2 weeks ago. And
2
1
weeks
week
ago. And then I participated in one the end of last week. And this has to do with the PFAS contamination in the center of town, specifically around the fire station. So Becky, do you want to just give us an overview of what this is about? And you're muted.
With the aggressive approach by Rep. Aaron Saunders, he brought to Shutesbury a collection of 8 folks from the Clean Water Trust who were on their way to Greenfield to do a presentation about their work. So we ended up spending an hour with them at the fire station, thanks to Lenny hosting us, discussing the possibilities of getting any kind of support funding, whether it be a loan or if there's any grant money available. And what we ended up learning is that the bulk of the trust, about 900, I'm sorry?
You're coming in and out, Becky.
Oh, I am?
Yeah, a little bit.
Um,
Keep going, keep going. I'll
No.
wave to you if we can't.
Okay, I'll try to be slower and louder. So we ended up learning that the bulk of their funds, about $900 million spent this year on PFAS or finance, helping to finance municipalities across the state with cleanup issues, all went to public water supplies. So straight off the gate, we do not have a public water supply, especially, we do have one at the school, a very small localized one, but we do not have, as you all know, you have private wells. So we did not qualify. We were very concerned that that was the case. Aaron Saunders did a beautiful job of outlining the inequity in servicing all these wealthier, bigger towns that had mixed tax income streams, commercially, a strong commercial base. And then here's a town like Shutesbury on the edge of the Quabbin, responsible for safekeeping of the state's water supply. And we were struggling to finance $136,000 for immediate response for clean water. I think Ms. Panad was quite taken with our story. The fact that we had to raise such a significant amount of money meant something to her. And by the next week, our DEP, the Western Mass office at DEP, also started reaching out to her. And she had said that she would talk to them to get a sense of possibilities. Well, she did. And then we had the second meeting that Rita referred to. And at that meeting, she laid out that she was offering us application to the emergency trust fund that our case qualifies. We didn't have to be a public water supply. The urgency of that, it is 0% interest money. But what we had learned in the first meeting was that we are classified as a low-income community statewide. And being such, we would qualify for a higher a level of forgiveness on our loan. And what she stated in the meeting was 20% forgiveness was definitely possible. And what she had stated in the prior meeting, that she had seen up to 39% loan monies waived and forgiven. So that combination makes this a really a viable path for the town to take. I believe the select board is in support. I know Rita was after hearing the details. The application could be sent out this week. What is required is a letter from the town explaining their situation, as well as copies of the LSP, their latest report, the IRA that they had just done, as well as documentation of what we had, how we were spending our money. So tonight I have just sketched out a rough draft of a letter for the select board to review. And I don't know if you wanted to do that tonight, Rita, or we can do that now if you would like. And then
yeah, before we go to the letter, I just want to kind of back up a little bit and just give that sort of, broad overview of, of where we are. So we are under DEP orders now at the fire station because of findings both from soil and from the test wells that we have PFAS. We already knew we had PFAS, and we had been very, we had acted very quickly last summer and got a lot of accolades from the DEP folks who oversee PFAS, that the town took very quick action when we learned that there was PFAS contamination. There were filters put into, I believe, 5 properties in the center of town where the findings of PFAS, again, PFAS, I can't remember what's like poly something. It's the forever chemicals that you hear about. And so that action was taken. And then at the special town meeting, we followed up after after DEP said, we need you to go back. We need you to do more testing. We need you to, see what the extent of the PFAS contamination is. And so town meeting allocated that $136,000. Becky has been working with, and Geneva have sent out letters to everybody within 500 feet of the fire station. Lots of testings being done. Some of the reportings, coming back in. It takes a while to get the PFAS results. But so we allocated that $136,000 from free cash. And what we have the opportunity with the Clean Water Trust, which is part of state government, it's a state agency that works really closely with DEP, is they have said to us, this is an emergency. Even though you've already voted the money, we are willing to consider, if the select board chooses to make a request, that they would provide us that 0% interest loan for 20 years with a pretty definite assurance that at least part of it will be forgiven. And there's been a range. 20% was on the low end. There was a higher end. But they will turn this around, and even again, we could put the money back into free cash. And if between now and the time when we would vote on this, because it would have to be a vote that goes to annual town meeting, because it would be debt. there are additional costs if we find the PFAS contamination goes out further. That could potentially be additional money that we could add on to the loan. So they are very anxious. The Clean Water Trust was very anxious for us to pursue this. And as Becky mentioned, what they said, we have to submit a letter, and then the IRA, which is not the Irish Republican Army, but the immediate response action report that was submitted. We have engineers on board. Ty and Bond is working on this. They have a lot of experience with PFAS. So, you know, again, we have an opportunity. It will eventually go to town meeting. But the first step in this process is for the board to, select board to agree to submit this letter of request to the Clean Water Trust.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah.
And Becky, at some point, I assume the Finance Committee will kind of weigh in on this.
Mhm.
Right.
They haven't met since Thursday.
Yeah, this is all happening pretty quickly, but as I said, it will go to town meeting. So Becky, you want to show us the draft letter?
Oh,
See half of it.
you can't,
Yep, we can see it now.
There we go. Good,
Yep.
thank you.
interesting.
You want to scroll down? Yeah.
You have to find a way to deal with it and move forward, and I have done that. Now the
Not everybody is muted. Please mute yourself.
actually being at the time.
Thank you. I just see a typo, which is already highlighted there.
The one in red. up on
Units,
the-
yeah, dual vessel units.
The first poets has two parentheses are after the poet, the word poets too. It's very minor.
That's because the beginning of the parentheses was over here, Eric.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, yeah. I guess you're right.
Any other questions, Melissa
Mm.
or Eric?
No.
Again, this is the first step in the process,
Mhm.
and it will be coming to town meeting. So I want to thank Becky for just really working very hard to sort of pull this all together in a really short period of time, at the same time that we're undertaking all of the PFAS testing. And I don't know, how many houses did you have to do, Becky?
I think in the end, there's just under 40. About 43. 43. I think.
So
Have they all been done now?
We have 3 stragglers.
And how
But I
many of
heard
them
from
have
one-
PFAS?
I'm sorry?
How many of them have had reportable conditions of PFAS?
This round of testing is a brand new round of testing. And in November, we had done the 5 homes. We redid the 5 homes that had high levels, so they weren't part of this testing. So the 42 homes this round, with 3 left, we don't have all the test results back. We only started to get the results for
Right.
the tests taken 3 weeks ago, are just starting to come in. So they'll come in slowly over the next 3 weeks.
So we'll be here probably at our next select board meeting, maybe an update as to where things are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve the submission of a emergency loan request to the Clean Water Trust?
So moved.
Second,
Is there any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Farrell, aye. Thank you, Becky. I will be in tomorrow if the letter is ready in the morning.
Yes, and we have a few things for you, Rita.
Oh, good. I want to make the trip worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are behind schedule here, but we're making progress. So the next item on the agenda is discussion about the Lake Wyola drawdown. And I think there's, there are a number of issues having to do with the with Lake Wyola and the dam at Lake Wyola, for which the town is responsible. And I know we had, I can't remember now, we've had a number of, we've had correspondence from both the Conservation Commission and as well as the Lake Wyola Advisory Committee and Mark Rivers. And I think we have kind of before us a lot of work to do regarding the dam and permitting. And so Becky, I don't know how you want to proceed. This is yet another task for which we will be looking for professional assistance, because it's just the nature of the beast. And I think Becky's been putting together a scope of services for what's going to be needed, and maybe you want to kind of lead us through that. And I don't know if
Sure,
Mark Rivers
I'm just going to do this one verbally. It's in progress.
Okay.
So for many years, we've drawn down the lake annually, and about 5 or 6 years ago, it became known to town officials that we needed to do permitting around the drawdown. 5 years ago, and paperwork was put together, permitting was put together, and the group of folks working on it were volunteers for the town that put their best efforts forward, working on the notice of intent. They did hire a specialist for the wildlife habitat evaluation. And as we started this round, we're about 8 months out from the expiration of the current permit, which was a 5-year permit. We are in a state where we need to act quickly, but at the same time very carefully to understand what our requirements and obligations are for this permitting. We have received a lot of documents from the Conservation Commission to help guide us. And we are working through those, and I'm putting together a scope of services for a professional firm. We are trying to figure out how extensive it has to be. We feel the notice of intent most likely will have to be done by the consultant, probably Chapter 91 permitting and the wildlife habitat evaluation. But we're approaching it carefully because this is going to be very expensive for the town, and it's shifting from a very volunteer-oriented process, which it had been since the days of Bill Elliott, and now we have Mark Rivers and others involved. Penny Jake was involved as Concom and assisted in the first notice of intent for the drawdown. We don't have we're shifting into a more professional approach as recommended by the Conservation Commission. So as we do that, we'll be making sure that we are compliant and that we understand what we have to accomplish. And hopefully we can do it smoothly, but it's going to be very expensive and it's going to take us a number of months to complete.
Becky, in addition to all this permitting that has to happen and going through the process with the Conservation Commission, Mark Rivers also mentioned that the dam might need some repairs too.
Yes, and I've been talking with Morris Root also about the repairs. The repairs.
And Morris
have been-
Root did the
Morris
inspection.
Root, yes, and he's finishing up his final reports for the town. And we hope to have them by Friday for this the last inspection he did. So we have a list of about 4 things that have to get repaired. Some of them have been on the list for a long time. And part of the issue is we have to get a crane in over the wetland and to assist in the seepage. I think it's called a monitoring weir. And it's been seeping and it's been seeping and it's been seeping for a very long time, but it's not supposed to. So we hope to get that corrected at the same time that the construction company is here to replace the culvert, the Locks Pond culvert. That is our goal that we hope to achieve. The other projects are much smaller. They're remortaring and issues that might be able to be done by a group of volunteers. But again, we have to see to the permitting around that, as well as the overall culvert installation at the same time.
Lots
So
of
Becky,
things. Yeah,
The
go ahead,
scope
Eric.
of services will also include, I think, I don't think you mentioned this, at least I missed it. Will also include some to do I think they're biannual inspections of the dam, right? That's part of the services that we're looking for.
Yeah, that's that when we look at, so we've got 2 very separate things going on that are connected and might be professionally connected. We've got to do the dam repairs. We've got to continue to get the dam inspected after the retirement of Morris Root, who has been doing it for the last 30 years. So there are not a lot of active professionals in his field. So the sooner we start looking, the better is the recommendation from the Lake Wyola Association, from Mark Rivers and folks he's been working with. So that will be a separate scope of services defined for that, because it'll be ongoing, and where it could overlap with it potentially the same firm, we will find out. But so we'll have to approach it in a couple of different ways.
Okay.
Melissa?
No, I was just reading something the Becky had sent us.
So Becky, what are the next steps?
Completing the scope of services, putting together a bid package, probably an RFP, so that we can evaluate the proposals. We're talking about potentially hiring consultants, consulting firms. Consulting firms don't have the same burden of bidding, but if we want to go through the RFP process, I think it's the most flexible to get the specific skills we're looking for. So we'd probably use the RFP process.
And what do you need from us? That will come back to the select board then for a vote on once the request for proposals is.
Yeah, I guess
drafted?
it's probably best to work with LWAC on the proposal.
Oh, okay.
with Mark being the chair of the committee with the most information on the subject.
And the
And-
LWAC, just because Eric loves acronyms so much, is the Lake Wyola Advisory Committee.
Yes,
And that's made up of town officials and folks from the lake.
yes.
I know that one, by the way.
Yeah. I wanted to test, that was a test, Eric, to see if you were paying
I
attention.
know. Right.
Eric is the select board representative on the Lake Wyola Advisory Committee. So you do an RFP, and then do we need to vote on that before it gets issued?
I'll work with the LWAC committee to get them to approve it and then give to you so
Okay.
that they can focus in on the details, because I'll also need them to evaluate responses. And then we can bring the contract to the select board.
Okay, all right, great.
So I guess back to my previous question. So will we do two RFPs, one for the inspector and one for all the other stuff we're not talking about? Will there
I
be
think
two
so.
RFPs? Don't we
I
have to do
think
two
so.
of them?
I believe we need two at this time. That could
Okay.
change.
And then, and the repairs, Becky, how do we do that?
Those won't. It depends on the generosity of a number of our volunteers outside of the piece of where I need to work with a construction company about the weir and getting the crane. I know Walter Tibbetts has been very involved in this for a long time and might help with facilitating some of that. It'll depend, or else we'll have to hire somebody to come in and do the work.
Yeah, it'd be great if we could not have if we need a crane, it doesn't make any sense to not try to do it when we're doing the culvert.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely, it's been the goal.
Yeah, okay.
Put off
Good.
and put off, so. it's
All
part of the
right.
plan. We'll get it done.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, that update. You've had your plate very full. So the last thing is the PFAS update. And I know you've already talked a lot about what's been going on. Is there anything that you haven't mentioned with regard to PFAS?
Well, the good news, I did have a call from the one person I hadn't communicated with, so I believe we'll get to wrap it up this week.
Great.
I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay. All right. So that's a stay tuned. And the very last thing is town administrator updates. Is there anything else that you wanted to?
I do have one thing, and I just wanted to remind you about there was a unanticipated item about the disclosure as well.
Oh, right, right.
But before that, so Aaron Saunders called this afternoon. I guess he stuck home with the kids on a snow day. He was busy he was reaching out to find out if the town of Shutesbury would support the extension of remote meetings for 2 years. It's going to be voted on tomorrow in the House. And I had let him know that we were, folks in town do count on them. And we're one of the towns that is still doing almost 100% Zoom meetings. There is talk about not doing Zoom meetings for some committees at this point. But I think in general, having it as a possibility, because you can't do hybrid meetings if you can't do remote meetings. So
And then again, Becky, you can't do hybrid meetings if you can't do remote meetings. Okay,
Right.
so we need to have remote meetings.
right.
Eric, Melissa, are you in support of the continuation of remote meetings?
Yeah, I actually
okay.
like it. And I mean, I think earlier tonight, we had 64 people on here.
I know.
I don't think we would have had 64 people in the town hall, in a meeting. I just don't think we would have got that participation from people. So I think it's good.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
disagree. I wonder though, if they do, Becky, this is a question that I don't know if answer. If they do say we can't have remote meetings, maybe we figure out a way where committee members are in town hall, but there's still, people can zoom in to listen and watch.
And that would be a hybrid meeting.
Okay,
Yeah, so that,
Okay.
that'll be a question, whether those, I think they should be allowed because prior to COVID, years ago, over a dozen years ago, we had authorized the remote participation by committee members.
Yep.
So we know that committee members can call into meetings. So so potentially, I have to ask him what the rules are, because there was a time
Yeah.
where we weren't going to be able to do anything if it wasn't 100%. So
I was just, maybe we could think, anyway, just a thought. But yeah, if we have to stay remote for some time, we stay remote for some time, more time. Maybe,
okay.
I think-
maybe they will vote hybrid because they know people participate more.
Yeah.
We'll
I
see.
think they'll vote for remote meetings. Yeah, I think that a lot of towns, he said a lot of his feedback overall is in support. And it's just one of those things I haven't had time to advocate for. There's too much else going on in town.
I'm sure there's plenty of others advocating for it. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do we want to take a vote then to support the 2-year extension of remote meetings?
sure, I'll make a motion that we support the 2-year extension of remote meetings.
Second,
Okay, any further discussion? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Make peace, O'Neill, aye.
Stalker, aye.
Carol, aye. Okay, as you can hear my printer going, I was just printing out, there was an unanticipated item for this evening that I do want to proceed with if Melissa and Eric are in agreement. And Becky notified me that she had contacted the State Ethics Commission to see whether or not there was a need to submit a disclosure of financial interest because of Becky's proximity to the fire station and the PFAS work that's going on. So this is a form that has to be submitted to state ethics, where the appointing authority, which is the select board, makes a determination that the official, in this case Becky, doesn't have, is able to perform her duties despite the fact that she is within now what's our PFAS exploration area. I don't know what else to call it, within the 500 feet of the fire station. And Becky completed the form. I have reviewed it. It just outlines what the particular matter is, and that is that we're doing work related to PFAS in the center of town, and Becky has responsibilities and has been doing a tremendous job in overseeing both our consulting engineer, Tyan Bond, on the PFAS contamination, as well as working with the individual homeowners who are impacted by this. So Becky, am I missing anything?
And also my brother's property is in the same zone.
Okay, so you have a family member too. So I just want to make sure if there are any questions, Melissa or Eric, about your comfort level in executing this document. Again, it's simply a disclosure that we as a board are comfortable with Becky performing the tasks in our job description, even given the fact that she is, again, within that 500-foot zone.
No
Any
concern-
questions?
No concerns, no
no
questions.
concerns.
Okay, good. All right, so do I hear a motion to approve the disclosure as required by General Law, Chapter 268, Section 19, regarding our town administrator, Rebecca Torres?
So moved.
Second,
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
it's Dr. I.
Farrell, aye. And I apologize for not, it kind of slipped my mind, Becky, with everything else about mentioning it earlier. So, okay, is that it?
I think it is.
Dinner time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody, for coming this evening, and I will be in the morning to sign lots of stuff. And do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
For a
Second,
second? Okay, all those in favor?
Makepeace O'Neill, aye.
Dr. I.
Farrell, aye. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Right, thank you.
Night. Thank you.
Good night.